Welcome to the History Guy Podcast, a podcast dedicated to stories of lesser-known historical events told by Lance Geiger, also known as the History Guy on YouTube. I'm Josh, your host, a writer for the channel and eldest son of the History Guy. We tell all kinds of stories about history, from the modern era to the ancient past, so you never know what we're going to talk about next. One thing you can be sure of, it is history that deserves to be remembered. On today's episode, the History Guy tells two stories of dental health, examining humanity's long relationship with our teeth. First, he tells the story of toothpaste and basic dentistry, and the many ways that dental care has changed over the years. Then he turns to orthodontics and our centuries-long quest for the perfect smile. Without further ado, let me introduce the History Guy.
Delta Dental, which is an association of dental insurance companies, does an annual survey regarding the state of America's oral health and wellness. And according to the latest survey, some 72% of Americans say that they brush their teeth at least twice a day. That habit isn't just limited to Americans. A study last year of some 15,000 people in 15 different countries determined that 53% said that they brush their teeth twice a day, all that toothbrushing leading to a global toothpaste market that Fortune Business Insights valued at nearly $18 billion annually in 2019. But the products that we use today for our oral health are relatively new inventions, whereas teeth are as old as, well, humanity itself. And the development of these products that affect the morning routines of billions of people worldwide deserves to be remembered. Alan Cooper, director of the Australian Centre for Ancient DNA, told St. Louis Public Radio in 2013 that hunter-gatherers had really good teeth. This might seem to be a surprise, as NPR notes. Prehistoric humans didn't have toothbrushes, they didn't have floss or toothpaste, and they certainly didn't have Listerine. Yet somehow their mouths were a lot healthier than ours are today. But around 12,000 years ago, there was a significant shift in the way people lived. In what has been called the Neolithic Revolution, humans started developing systems for producing food rather than relying on hunting and gathering, and people started living in agricultural communities that would eventually grow into cities and civilizations. This change had huge impacts on human society and culture, and one surprising effect was on our teeth. Cooper notes, as soon as you get to farming populations, you see this massive change. Huge amounts of gum disease and cavities start cropping up. The reason, a 2013 study in the journal Nature Genetics argues, has to do with bacteria. The study, entitled Sequencing Ancient Calcified Dental Plaque, shows changes in oral microbiota with dietary shifts of the Neolithic and Industrial Revolutions. Determined that data from 34 early European skeletons indicate that the transition from hunter-gatherer to farming shifted the oral microbial community to a disease-associated configuration. Put simply, as the human diet changed, suddenly tooth decay became an issue. NPR explains that the researchers found that as prehistoric humans transitioned from hunting and gathering to farming, certain types of disease-causing bacteria that were particularly efficient at using carbohydrates started to win out over other types of friendly bacteria in human mouths, adding that the addition of processed flour and sugar during the Industrial Revolution only made matters worse. While the findings have relevance to oral health today, with Cooper arguing that understanding the mouth's microbiome is as important as brushing and flossing, one implication is that oral hygiene only became an issue at the time that people started settling in communities, a point that some see as part of the dividing line between history and prehistory. That is, the need for brushing and flossing is not as old as humanity, but is as old as human history. And early civilizations recognized the problem. The website of the Sindek Museum of the University of Michigan School of Dentistry notes that the first known written mention of oral hygiene dates back more than 5,000 years, when Assyrian cuneiform medical texts mentioned teeth cleaning procedures. Toothpicks dating back to this time have been found in other sites in Mesopotamia. If you were wondering what came first, toothpaste or the toothbrush, the website of toothpaste manufacturer Colgate argues that Egyptians used a paste to clean their teeth around 5000 BC, even before toothbrushes were invented. The website Realm of History writes that the world's oldest known formula for a toothpaste unsurprisingly comes from Egypt. To that end, a papyrus dating from circa 4th century AD contains the recipe for what has been described by the ancient scribe as powder for white and perfect teeth that transformed into a clean toothpaste. The website explains that the recipe calls for 1 drachma of rock salt, 1 drachma of mint, and 1 drachma of the dried iris flower, all mixed with around 20 grains of pepper. According to the document, the composition should form a paste-like consistency when in contact with the saliva of the mouth. The website goes on to say that the formula was tested by modern dentists and the results noted at a dental conference in 2003. Austrian dentist Dr. Heinz Neumann reported there that nobody in the dental profession had any idea that such an advanced toothpaste formula of this antiquity existed. I believe that this recipe would have been a big improvement on some of the soap toothpastes used much later. Ancient toothpaste mixtures could be both more exotic and, especially in the case of Greeks and Romans, more abrasive. Writing in a 1947 edition of the Journal of History of Medicine and Allied Sciences, physician and medical historian THG Drake listed the recipe of 1st century Roman naturalist Pliny. The ash of a mixture of barley, salt, and honey, fig tree ashes, powder or ash of hartshorn, bone ash mixed with myrrh, ashes of hare's head, with or without the ash of mice and rats' heads, ash of ankle bones of goats and other 4-footed domestic beasts, or calcined eggshell to make the teeth look white and the breath smell sweet. A 2014 edition of the South China Morning Post notes that from the earliest times the Chinese knew that gargling with salt water, tea, or wine after meals helped prevent tooth decay because of the antiseptic properties of these liquids. Records of the Grand Historian, completed around 94 BC, recounts an episode of a doctor tending to a patient suffering from tooth decay, and one of the reasons given for the ailment was that he did not gargle after eating. It isn't clear when tooth powders were first introduced in China, but the Morning Post notes that they were being sold in shops by the Song period around 1000 AD. The Post writes that toothpastes were made by adding water to various ingredients and boiling the concoction until it was reduced to a paste. The Post lists the ingredients of a 1390 recipe for tooth powder: soap bean, ginger, bug bane, Chinese foxglove, false daisy, seed pod of the Japanese pagoda tree, wild ginger, lotus leaves, and rock salt. While these early versions of toothpaste might have been applied by finger or with cloth, they were also applied using the precursor to the modern toothbrush, the chew stick. In the 2013 book Dental Biotribology, professor of prosthodontics Haiyang Yu of the West China School of Sichuan University writes that the toothbrush seems to have had its origins in the chewing sticks of Babylonia as early as 3500 BC. Ancient Greek and Roman literature discuss the use of toothpicks, which are used to keep the mouth clean. Over the years, the toothpick evolved into a chew stick, which was the size of a pencil. Records from China around 1600 BC show that one end was chewed until it became brush-like, while the other end was pointed and used as a toothpick. Despite their ancient origins, chew sticks are still used in many parts of the world today. ScienceAlert.com explains that many people in the Middle East and some parts of South and Southeast Asia use twigs from the arak tree to clean their teeth. An article in a 2009 edition of the Internet Journal of Family Practice notes that these plants are very carefully selected for such properties as foaminess, hardiness, or bitterness, and certain species are more popular than others. A great number of these plant species have related medical properties that may be antibacterial. Science Alert notes that the wood of the arak tree has a high concentration of fluoride and other antimicrobial components that prevent tooth decay. The article in the Internet Journal of Family Practice notes that several studies have demonstrated that the plaque-removing properties of chew sticks and conventional toothbrushes are similar, and in fact chew sticks may be superior to conventional toothbrushes in some respects. However, other studies suggest that chew sticks can abrade the gums and contribute to gum recession. But brushes similar to what we use today are older than you might think. The National Museum of American History notes that the earliest examples were likely made in China during the Tang Dynasty, between 618 and 907 AD. They can still be seen at institutions like the Shanghai Museum. In time, thanks in large part to itinerant merchants and monks, news of this Asian technology arrived in the West. The museum notes that there are mentions of little brushes for making clean of the teeth being used in France, at least from the 17th century. However, Pierre Fauchard, considered by many to be the father of modern dentistry, known for his 1728 work The Surgeon Dentist, considered to be the first comprehensive dental textbook, preferred the use of a sponge rather than a brush. He argued that those that use little brushes to whiten and clean the teeth use them without knowing that these materials are too rough, and their frequent usage practiced indiscriminately destroys the gums and the teeth. This conclusion should not be surprising, as dental powders at the time often included highly abrasive materials such as brick, porcelain, pumic stone, calcined talc, and calcined aluminum. These tools for oral hygiene, many with ancient roots, developed slowly. For example, in the 18th century, abrasive powders were still commonly used for cleaning teeth, with one 1780 recipe using burnt toast. The website of Crest Toothpaste notes that it wasn't until 1824 that a dentist named Peabody began adding soap to toothpaste to ensure cleanliness. It's from here that we can note specifically when toothpaste was invented to keep mouths fresh and clean. There is dispute over exactly when toothpaste started to be produced in more modern forms. The website of New England Dental Associates credits an American dental surgeon named Washington Wentworth Sheffield, who in the 1850s created a ready-made tooth cream, which included mint extracts for flavor for use on his patients. As the story goes, Dr. Sheffield's patients would request samples of his tooth cream so frequently that he began mass-producing his product. In 1873, the Colgate Company started selling aromatic toothpaste in jars. Dr. Sheffield was credited with another innovation as well. The website Beauty Packaging notes that in 1841, American artist John Golf Rand invented a pliable metal tube to effectively hold paint. DearDoctor.com explains that Sheffield's son, Dr. Lucius Sheffield, visited Paris, where he saw artists using Rand's collapsible metal tubes for their paints and inks. In 1892, when he returned home from his visit, he shared the idea with his father. A new mechanism for packaging his father's own brand of toothpaste, creme dentifrice. The newly packaged product became a big success and was much more hygienic. In 1896, Dear Doctor continues, Colgate began packaging toothpaste in a tube, and for the last 100-plus years, patients worldwide have benefited from a tremendous selection of collapsible tube toothpaste products sold every day. Tubes were originally made of tin or lead, but Beauty Packaging notes a metal shortage caused by World War II put an end to tubes made of tin and lead, and packaging producers moved to aluminum and plastic. The aluminum was still included because, Packaging News explains, by the 1950s, manufacturers were making plastic tubes for suntan lotion. But this type of polyethylene tube reacted with toothpaste ingredients. Thus, Beauty Packaging writes, most toothpaste tubes have been made from sheets of plastic laminate, which is usually a combination of various plastics surrounded by a thin layer of aluminum that works to protect the taste and formula of the product inside. Another change came in 1945 when Dental Associates of New England writes, soap was finally removed from toothpaste and replaced with different ingredients such as sodium lauryl sulfate to create an emulsified paste. Another innovation was the addition of fluoride, which research on water supply suggested strengthened tooth enamel. The National Inventors Hall of Fame writes that researchers Joseph Mueller and William Nebergall tested fluoride compounds to determine which was the most effective hardening and protective agent for tooth enamel. In the 1950s, the Hall of Fame writes, the team introduced a formulation containing stannous fluoride. Shortly thereafter, the product was licensed to Procter & Gamble, and stannous fluoride toothpaste was introduced in limited test markets in 1955. In 1956, Procter & Gamble introduced Crest toothpaste, and by the late 1970s, the Hall of Fame writes, a steep nationwide decline in cavities was attributed in part to the widespread use of fluoride toothpaste. Today, all toothpaste with the ADA seal of acceptance must contain fluoride. Curiously, these developments did not necessarily convince Americans to concern themselves with oral hygiene. Writing on the website Medium in 2013, author Lailat Vyas notes that at the turn of the century, despite the nation's dental problems, just 7% of Americans brushed their teeth. As a result, Vyas writes, there was an army of door-to-door salesmen hawking dubious tooth powders and elixirs, most of them going broke. The national habit of brushing our teeth was the result, Vyas notes, of the legendary ad man Claude C. Hopkins. Approached by a friend who wanted to sell a toothpaste called Pepsodent, Hopkins, famous for using psychology to sell, focused on a trigger of tooth film, telling consumers just run your tongue across your teeth and you'll feel a film, and that's what makes your teeth look off color and invites decay. Note how many pretty teeth are seen everywhere. Millions are using a new method of teeth cleansing. Why would any woman have dingy film on her teeth? Pepsodent removes that film. While tooth film is actually quite natural and has nothing to do with dingy teeth, Hopkins' connection between Pepsodent and beauty was a natural trigger. Writing in his book The Power of Habit, author Charles Duhigg notes that Hopkins' greatest contribution would be helping to create a national toothbrushing habit. Before Pepsodent, almost no Americans brushed their teeth. A decade after Hopkins' advertising campaigns, pollsters found that toothbrushing had become a daily ritual for more than half the population. While the formulation of toothpaste developed over the 19th century, toothbrushes hardly changed. For example, the first U.S. patent for a toothbrush by H.M. Wadsworth in 1857 separated the bristles more than the common brush, but was still made using boar's hair. The Cavendish Vermont Historical Society notes that mass production of toothbrushes didn't occur in the United States until 1885. The society notes that toothbrushes were not issued to Civil War soldiers and were expensive, and thus without a toothbrush they would have used whatever was handy: rags, salt, a finger, leaves, and probably a chewing stick. That is, Civil War soldiers were taking care of their teeth in much the same way that soldiers did in ancient Rome. The Library of Congress notes that boar bristles were used until 1938, when nylon bristles were introduced by the DuPont Company. The first nylon toothbrush was called Dr. West's Miracle Toothbrush. While the use of objects like toothpicks to clean between teeth dates back to ancient times, dental floss is a relatively new invention. A 1999 edition of the Journal of the History of Dentistry credits the invention of dental floss to New Orleans dentist Dr. Levi Spear in 1815. He used a wax and silk thread and extolled the importance of flossing in his 1819 work, A Practical Guide to the Management of Teeth. The website of Oral-B explains that the idea caught on, and in 1882 a company called the Codman and Shirtlick Company, based in Randolph, Massachusetts, began marketing an unwaxed silk dental floss. This was followed in 1896 by the first dental floss from Johnson & Johnson. The New Jersey-based J&J took out a patent for dental floss in 1898 that was made from the same silk material used by doctors for silk stitches. The website ABC Science describes how the product has developed since. During the Second World War, Dr. Charles C. Bass, a medical doctor, realized that nylon would have advantages over silk as a flossing material. Nylon could be produced in great lengths, which all had a consistent diameter, could be supplied in different sizes, and had greater resistance to abrading and shredding than silk. Wax-coated dental floss was introduced in the 1940s, and dental floss in the shape of a tape rather than the thread was introduced in the 1950s. This was followed by flavored flosses such as mint and cinnamon, and more recently, various suprasynthetics such as Gore-Tex and Teflon are being incorporated into dental floss. By 1996, Americans purchased over 4.3 million kilometers of dental floss per year. Oral healthcare products have continued to develop. Heck, all you have to do is look at the aisle in your local grocery store to see the number of different kinds of toothbrush and toothpaste that are available. Today you can buy toothpaste that do things like whiten your teeth or reduce dental sensitivity or remove tartar or prevent the development of plaque for 12-hour periods, as well as a more recent trend towards more natural or organic toothpastes that use fewer things like chemical stabilizers or perfumes or flavors. Still, despite the advances in technology, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control noted last year that nearly 1 in 4 American adults have untreated tooth decay, and 46% show signs of gum disease. A 2022 World Health Organization report notes that it is estimated that oral diseases affect nearly 3.5 billion people. The report concludes, oral diseases, while largely preventable, pose a major health burden for many countries and affect people throughout their lifetime, causing pain, discomfort, disfigurement, and even death. Dentists today recommend that you should brush for at least 2 minutes twice a day with a fluoride toothpaste. And New York dentist Lena Rosenberg told Yahoo Health that it's very important that you brush in the morning to get rid of bacteria and in the evening after a full day of eating, drinking, and accumulating plaque. And in addition, the American Dental Association recommends that you floss at least once a day.
Now's the part of the episode where we get to chat with the history guy. A little bit about what we just heard, what we're going to hear, and some behind-the-scenes stuff that you only get to hear about on the podcast. So I think one of the things I really notice from watching a video like this one is that I think we take for granted what toothpaste is and how much it has improved dental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that it's such a simple...
one of the things about this one is that the idea of oral hygiene and oral care goes back farther maybe than you would have thought, and that they had a version of toothpaste in ancient Egypt. But it also, it'll make you appreciate the products that we have available today.
Yeah.
But still,
our
one of
understanding.
the points is, we've gotten now so many chemicals and stuff in the products that there's people that are moving back to more pure products too. So, it's it's just to say that technology, it changes over time. But you have more and better options, and you have a better chance of keeping your teeth through your lifespan than any generation did before. Despite the fact that we've been working on this forever. Maybe not any generation before, though, because it sounds like we didn't have oral health problems until we settled down into civilizations, which is another interesting bet. Yeah.
That's possibly the most interesting piece about this.
Yeah.
Is that we kind of, if I guess if you think of us as like animals and where we were before we started really using civilization. Our bodies were built to eat the food that we had kind of evolved
apparently,
to eat.
yeah.
And then as soon as we moved and started to have, and I mean, we're talking about stuff that is absolutely integral to even the concept of human civilization.
Yes. Mostly stored grain, but yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, it actually, that tooth decay was apparently not a problem among hunter-gatherers prior to civilization.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting story in itself. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess maybe part of it would be that you wouldn't, we, especially in the modern world, we live for a long time.
That's true.
And, even on the, and so we've got a lot of time for our teeth to go bad.
Eaten by a tiger before they long enough for their teeth to rot. That's a fair point.
Even the evidence we have of folks, where they're keeping someone old who might not be able to, pull their weight, they're still usually not, 95.
There's some of it, yeah. Well, and I know there are some of the Australopithecine skulls and stuff they found indicate that they had infections and other stuff like that. So, I mean, it wasn't, but it appears that oral care came with civilization, which came with oral problems, and that did appear to have something to do with change in diet. And there's people that are still arguing that today, that if you're having tooth decay, that might have to do more than just sugar. Even it might have to do with chemistry in the body. I'm not a dentist, but but it is really interesting to hear when it started, why it started. But it is as old as human civilization is tooth decay, and is the medical practice of trying to take care of teeth. And yet, anybody that was living in ancient Babylon would have loved to have the wax dental floss and minty toothpaste options. Yeah, they talked about that toothpaste they made in Egypt, which used pepper and salt and had a little bit of mint in it. It's kind of interesting that it was mint, but I can't imagine what that.
I thought that too.
It didn't sound to me like it did taste very good.
No, and we've learned a lot about things like abrasives, that we're going to put into toothpaste, because you want it to be a little abrasive, but you also don't want it to be too abrasive. You had a lot less ability to kind of judge how abrasive it was going to be when you're putting together your mint and pepper and
salt.
And salt. you're just, and it worked a little bit, but it is interesting to me that we cared that long, and that mint has been apparently a part of the equation.
From the very first toothpaste might have been mint flavored. That is incredible to find out.
Yeah, which it's and because it gives you that minty clean feeling. Maybe they caught on to that at the beginning, and then from there we're just still
was
doing
the pepper
it.
For flavor? I mean, was it for spice? Or I don't know how important that is to texture or what the story is. But it's interesting that they tested it and found out that it worked better than maybe not a modern toothpaste, but better than a lot of stuff that we've used as toothpaste over the years.
Yeah, it's a reasonably effective. You wonder with some of that in terms of the tech. It's a technology, but it's something that would have required an awful lot of just trial and error.
It did, yeah.
Because
but there's a lot of that in ancient medicine too. I mean, they had a long time to do it. And it's also interesting to find out that oral care was probably better in ancient Egypt than it was in the 18th century, when it was kind of fell out of favor.
Yeah, and
no one was taking care of their teeth, and that's why we got the bizarre set of Washington. I just saw Washington's teeth there. 2 months ago. The lead, they're set in lead.
We had moved forward and backward.
And he lost all his teeth over his lifespan. Of course, a lot of people today can still lose their teeth when they're into his age. But there was a point where dental care wasn't important at all, and it would likely have been lesser in the 18th century than it might have been in ancient Rome.
Yeah. And it's amazing how that changed, and how much culturally we put of clean smelling breath and having white teeth. I mean, those are some extreme. We go to some extremes on some of that, and in the United States and in the modern world, with all kinds of whitening strips or veneers, which they do all kinds of for wealthy people and for movie stars and stuff like that. But we've been worrying at least about dental health for all of these years, and it's amazing to see how much is both a technological change and also a cultural one.
It is, yeah.
And how that can impact how someone in ancient Egypt, they cared about their teeth maybe more than some dude did in the 18th
Technology
century.
is impacted by culture. All that impacts history, and that's a piece to see here. It's not, and like so much of what we do on the History Guide, it's just not necessarily something you thought about having a history. Even on like dentistry pages, it was some of them. It seemed to be uncommon that they would really talk about history of dentistry past, just very recent history.
Yeah, it really is interesting how that's come into formation, because
yeah.
we did care about it that whole time.
We
And
did, yeah.
I mean,
but there's that period where the dude he would shave your face, he would apply leeches, and he would do dentistry. That's
yeah,
I'm not sure I'd trust
dentistry
that.
dentistry was made up mostly of yanking the tooth out. So some of the and well, when we talk about orthodontics later, and all of it is a little. I think even in the modern world we have tooth care, dentistry, orthodontics. Not a fun part of our lives in general. I don't like when they're scraping at my tooth with their little metal tools and stuff.
And I'm saying, this in the other episode we're talking about today too, that some people were uncomfortable with. They were uncomfortable with pictures, and they were uncomfortable. Yes. But the thing is, I mean, to me, history is history, and I think it's good to know. I think it says a lot about who we are. That our dental care has changed over time. That it goes back farther than we thought. I mean, I think it's quite interesting history. But yes, it is. I don't think there's very many people who like to go into the dental chair. And so it makes it kind of an interesting bit of history too, because it's not all pleasant memories. I tell you, I remember when Novocaine shots hurt a lot more than they do now. Yeah,
yeah, they're not as bad as they used to be.
Well, much less painful than it was even back in the last century there.
Well, I've had a root canal, and root canals are one of those things that are like the classic. Oh, that's so painful. Mm-hmm. And I'll when they shot me full of Novocaine for it, I would actually say the root canal part was not the most unpleasant. It is not as unpleasant as I expected it to be, given how often you hear this idea of I'd enjoy that like I'd enjoy a root canal. Yeah. That's that kind of talk, and it's not as big a deal as it must have used to have been, because I would not have come out of that like, gosh, that was the worst experience of my life. And I think that 50 years ago, I think that's what they were doing. That was extremely unpleasant. But I think it's interesting, that we can, as modern people, talk about our teeth and worrying about our teeth, and it's a very common thing that almost everybody is going to be thinking about, and that they were thinking about that 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. They were thinking similar things about their teeth and about their concerns about taking care of them. I think that's
across the world too, in China and in South America, and these are clever people that were coming up with lots of solutions to lots of things. Actually, some of the medical information that you get out of the subcontinent or Egypt or Rome is absolutely astounding, or China, and so wherever you were, people understood the problems, and kind of it appears that wherever you were, as soon as you started living in permanent settlements, as soon as you started settling down, that caused the sort of change in diet that would lead to the problem of tooth decay.
And that was wherever you were. That was a kind of a fact of civilization. And then we all, no matter what culture we were, we had to deal with that. And we came up with kind of remarkably similar solutions. And I mean, I guess it's if you have a particular problem, it makes sense that your solutions are going to be tailored to that problem, and so maybe they're going to be similar. But the fact that across the world they're using sticks as toothbrushes, also how shockingly they seem to be much more effective than I would have expected.
Yeah, I mean effective.
Particular kinds of
comparable
sticks,
to modern toothbrushes that we use here. Yeah, and it's still commonly used parts of that's really cultural, whether you use a toothbrush or whether you use a chewing stick. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting that's a part of that. And gosh, for a long time we didn't have these plastic things that we mass produced, and you were able to talk about that part of the history too. Because I think for most, especially if we're talking about the first world, I mean, what we use are these cheap plastic toothbrushes with nylon bristles, and that that's what a toothbrush looks like. And you showed a picture of like these ancient Chinese ones, which look remarkably similar in many ways, but were also made of things like boar's hair and whatever
bone,
else.
And they're going to be let's say
bone,
more serious materials.
A little grosser. I think that we we find it gross today, but
yeah, brushing your head with pig hair. Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a point too where they chewed on the pig's tail. They would chew on the bristles from a pig's tail. Yeah, doesn't sound great to me now, but
no, but it was a part of this. Yeah, I guess well before you have. We've gotten to this place of our use of like single use and limited use stuff has allowed us to have things that are like, this is a clean thing that no one else has used, that once it gets dirty I can throw it away. And there was a time before that.
And you might inherit your dad's toothbrush, yeah.
And that you would be lucky to have
it. There we go.
But I liked you talking about the metal toothpaste tubes too, which is an interesting.
Was it all changing technology? Changed things, yeah.
Yeah, it's not something you think about. You think about this technology in terms of how we've changed things, and that's that was a piece of. I mean, gosh, I think less often are they made of a lot of them are plastics.
Yeah, but they're still usually lined with aluminum. Yeah.
Yeah, which is interesting because I remember seeing those old ones, and you showed the picture of the, like, they've got that twist key to squeeze all the toothpaste out, and it's. I mean, that was cool. That was an incredible technological advancement for us to find a way that we could store it, an easy way for us to take it out instead of, dipping into a jar or whatever, which is a little gross, just because, at least in the tube, it comes out of one place. You're not just leaving the rest of it in the air.
Sitting out there, and double dipping, like a double dip tip,
Yeah. There's some advantage to that, and that's that was a technology that wasn't just something that, like, oh, we've always done that. That was something that someone was like, you know what, there's a better way to do this.
So I mean, when you have, there's a lot of technologies that are going to be tied to, whenever you have a broader development, then there's a lot of side technologies, because we use those tubes for things other than toothpaste too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we use them for all kinds of things in cooking and all these other things. It's just amazing to see how this stuff we take for granted, the stuff that we use every day but don't necessarily think about that much, and that we often, I think, get into this idea of, oh, it's probably been this way forever. And you find out, no, maybe not even that long.
No, it hasn't been that way forever, yeah.
And I think that's an interesting piece of many stories we're able to tell, but of this one especially. Toothpaste, something we use, well, you should use every day, although I read one comment on there that's not to shame anybody, but he's like, I've never brushed my teeth in 47 years and I have no cavities, and I'm like, okay.
I wonder if you know what? Don't mean to be rude, but
I was I hope it's true. I hope you never have a dental issue. But I've had my share of cavities, and gosh, my brother has had issues because he got hit by a car and landed on his face. So among other things, he's had all kinds of dental issues. It's not fun. I knocked a tooth out when I fell one time and hit a counter.
That's right.
That's no fun.
You had a so I've had fewer dental issues than you. I've never had teeth knocked out of my mouth.
Of all the dental things, I can understand why maybe after having some of those experiences where you're like, I don't know that I want to know much more about dentistry. I've had enough of people messing with my teeth as far as the history goes. But fortunately, there was a history before this, so that when I knocked my tooth out, they can put a new one in. That's been a shift even fairly recently. How well the implants and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I think dental care will continue to improve and change, and it's a lot less painful than it was. It's a lot more painless now. We have a lot more ways to maintain teeth now, so I mean, I think your sister had her first very small filling when she was 17. And I know I was getting fillings before that. So yeah, I mean, it'll continue. I imagine it'll continue to improve, with time. Yeah. But on the other hand, we more dietary challenges and things like that might be impacting teeth. And it's expensive. I mean, there's people who aren't getting dental care just because they can't afford to get dental care. That's true too. Yeah. So I mean, I think it'll be continuing. The development of dental care will be continuing. And I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, 100 years, is it going to look pretty much like it looks now, or are we going to have radical new ways to do the same thing? I don't know. But I mean, it's certainly. Finding out how long the history is gives you a better idea of how I mean, all technology, but also all medicine just occurs over time. It occurs very slowly, but it occurs.
Yeah, and we have dealt with these challenges, and as you said, we'll continue to.
We still have teeth.
I think
teeth are still a thing.
Right, and we're not in a place where we can put in new teeth, but we say there is a reason to care about that original set that you get.
Yeah, to try to hang on to what you got. Yeah.
If you are a listener and a watcher of the History Guy, and you want to support kind of what we do, talking about history and illuminating stories that we think deserve to be remembered, one of the best ways to do that is to support us on a place like Patreon. For a couple of dollars a month, that really helps us be able to do what we're doing and to keep and to focus as much as we've been able to focus on. Yeah. We really enjoy what we do. I'm really glad that we're able to tell these stories and to remind people about all kinds of parts of history that get forgotten. Patreon is our main place. There are a couple other ways that you can offer a couple of dollars.
Sometimes there's people who don't like Patreon, so we do have we have locals, and you can also become a sponsor on YouTube. But it is just to say that if you think that you like this sort of stuff, I mean, this is what we do for a living. It's not free, And it takes our time. And so if you appreciate it, if you like forgotten history and you think that it's good to learn this forgotten history, if you want to shift, $1, $2, $3 or more, I mean, some do more, a month. And if you're on Patreon there, then also, there's some stuff that you can get for it. You get a little bit more access to the history guide, but you also can get some our challenge coins or some of our merchandise and things like that. So it really is a massive help. It really makes sure that it's not a very big organization, but make sure that we can pay employees and take care of what do we count, 10 cats that are dependent upon the history guy. So if you think that this is worthwhile, if you want us to remember history, then that's a great way for you to support it. Even just a few dollars a month makes a big difference for us. And that's patreon.com/thehistoryguy.
Next up, the history guy tells the story of orthodontics.
The obsession with the perfect smile, especially here in the United States, has led to ever more sophisticated techniques for adjusting teeth, both for medical and aesthetic purposes. Estimates are that as many as 4 million Americans are wearing braces right now. A 2013 survey that was commissioned by the American Association of Orthodontists found that more than a third of Americans are unhappy with their smile. And the same survey found that bad teeth was the #1 dating turnoff for both men and women. And the quest for straighter teeth isn't a purely modern phenomenon. Attempts to correct maladjusted teeth go all the way back to antiquity, and some of the methods used in the past will make you feel happy that all you had to do was wear braces. The surprisingly long history of orthodontics deserves to be remembered. Humans have always had issues with dental health. A Sumerian text from 7,000 years ago blames toothworms for dental decay. The first dentists date at least to ancient Egypt. One common cause of dental wear was bread, which often had grit or sand in it. The Egyptians may have practiced crude orthodontics. Archaeological work has discovered a set of teeth tied together with gold wire, forming a 4-unit bridge to replace lost teeth, although it likely could not function like real teeth. There is some evidence they may have used catgut, a material usually made of sheep or goat intestines, to close gaps in teeth. But it's unclear, however, if this kind of dental work was done while the patient was alive or only after death as a part of the restoration work involved in ritual mummification. Ancient Etruscans from pre-Roman central Italy used gold bands to keep teeth from moving after death. Some of the first descriptions of malocclusion, or imperfect positioning of teeth, and possible solutions appear in the writings of the ancient Greeks, Hippocrates and Aristotle. Hippocrates wrote of fastening teeth together to keep them in place if the jaw was injured, preferably with a gold wire, but failing that, with thread, till consolidation takes place. He also offers the first known description of crowding. Among those individuals whose heads are long-shaped, some have thick necks, strong members and bones, others have strongly arched palates. Thus teeth are disposed to irregularity, crowding on one or the other. Aristotle observed and recorded how teeth grew, the extraction of teeth, gum disease, and the potential of using thin wire to straighten teeth. Hundreds of years later, a surviving treatise by Roman encyclopedist Aulus Cornelius Celsus brings up the concept of moving teeth simply by applying pressure to them with fingers. Greek physician Galen suggested using a file to even teeth that were protruding above their neighbors. Something that might surprise the modern audience is that the occurrence of malocclusions, crowding, and other orthodontic issues appears to be more common in modern cultures than it was in ancient ones. It is difficult to determine the condition and positioning of ancient teeth because of the relatively small number of preserved skulls, and the evidence we do have, like ancient Egyptian bridges, are no longer with the original mandibles and skulls they were found in. But based on available evidence, prehistoric man had very low incidences of crowding and irregular teeth, and study of bones from the Bronze Age suggests that malocclusion was only present in about 1% of the population, whereas modern estimates suggest that prevalence today is between 30 and 60%. Some experts suggest that increased prevalence may be due to a lack of chewing stress in the modern processed diet, especially in youth. Modern diet is also often blamed for the frequency of wisdom teeth impaction in today's society. One study identified jaw shape changes associated with the earliest farmers of the agricultural revolution. Whatever the cause, what would be called the true beginnings of orthodontics lies more than a millennium after the Greeks and Romans. In the Middle Ages, dentistry was practiced by barber surgeons who also cut hair and applied leeches. It wasn't until the 1600s that dentistry reappeared as a unique profession, as operators of the teeth who could open or widen the teeth when they are set too close together. By 1692, dentists were taking teeth impressions using wax. French dentist Pierre Fauchard is often credited as the father of modern dentistry thanks to his 1728 work, The Surgeon Dentist, the first complete scientific description of dentistry as a practice. Unlike previous writings that may have included dental work but didn't focus on them exclusively, the surgeon dentist covered dental work and health as its own field. Fauchard joined the French Navy at the age of 15 in 1693 and became interested in dental work under the influence of a surgeon major. Dental complaints, especially scurvy, were common on ships, and Fauchard hoped to bring what he learned about dentistry to the general public. After leaving the Navy, he began practicing medicine at the University of Angers Hospital, where he became a pioneer of oral and maxillofacial surgery. He called himself a surgeon dentist, a rare term at the time as dentists primarily extracted teeth instead of treating them. He was well respected as a dentist and helped to adapt or invent numerous tools for dentistry, as well as introducing fillings as a treatment for cavities. He came up with numerous methods to replace lost teeth, using substitutes of ivory and bone, and creating pieces that would be as functional as natural teeth, a major dental breakthrough. He echoed ancient practices by tying artificial teeth to solid teeth using thread or gold wire. And most importantly, for orthodontia, he also described the world's first braces. Initially made of gold, he discovered that teeth could be repositioned with the use of wires that could exert constant pressure on misaligned teeth. He also determined that it was easier to fix misalignment in childhood. In the mid-18th century, another French dentist, Louis Bordet, wrote The Dentist's Art and improved the method. Bordet was also the first known dentist to recommend removing premolar teeth as a method of alleviating crowding. One early example of the use of braces as a means of improving appearance is the story of Marie Antoinette. Fauchard described, but may not have invented, what he called a bandeau, a horseshoe-shaped piece of iron that attached to teeth using wires, to help expand the palate to alleviate crowding and reposition teeth into desired shapes. He also used a pair of forceps called a pelican to forcibly grab and reposition teeth manually, a horrifically painful procedure. At 14, Marie Antoinette, Archduchess of Austria, was promised as a political marriage to the future King Louis XVI of France. Negotiations for the marriage began years earlier, when Marie was only 10, and she was required to make a number of personal and physical changes in order to be amenable to the French court. She was required to wear new clothes that fit in with the French fashion, such as elaborate gowns and whalebone stays. Marie also had crooked, imperfect teeth. When she was 12, a dentist from France was sent to Austria to apply his techniques. The dentist made use of Fauchard's bandeau, which over a period of months reshaped her palate and smile to that of a future queen. Experiencing teeth correction via bandeau was a much more painful and drastic experience than today's modern braces. English anatomist John Hunter described the first clear orthodontic principles, as well as describing normal occlusion and differentiating between bones and teeth, and gave names like cuspidati and bicuspidati to teeth. He offered the first truly scientific description of the growth of jaws. It wasn't until the 1800s that several dentists expanded on these early works and separated orthodontics from general dentistry as its own science. Christophe François Delabarre introduced the first modern braces with his invention of the wire crib and separated crowded teeth using wood wedges. Orthodontics received its first modern name from another French dentist who coined the term in 1841. Shortly after the successful vulcanization of rubber, dentists began using rubber and rubber bands to assist with adjusting teeth. New York dentist Norman Kingsley designed removable plates to fix occlusion and became well known for his creations of dental prostheses, especially ones that allowed those with cleft palates to have normal use of their mouths for eating and speech. His book, A Treatise on Oral Deformities as a Branch of Mechanical Surgery, published in 1880, has been described as the first truly comprehensive textbook that talked about orthodontic problems and treatments. By the 1830s, the United States began to modernize and revolutionize dental care. As early as 1797, Boston surgeon dentist Josiah Flagg advertised that he could regulate teeth to prevent pain and fevers in children, and assist nature in the extension of the jaw for a beautiful arrangement of a second set of teeth. Occipital anchorage, or the use of headgear to use the skull as a resistance to align teeth, was invented in 1822. The first dental journal was established in 1839, and shortly after that, the first American School of Dentistry was founded at the University of Maryland in 1858. In 1840, The Dental Art by Chapman Harris described the use of gold caps on molars. Edward Angle, regarded as the father of American orthodontics, was originally trained as a dentist, but dedicated his career to orthodontia, founding the first school of orthodontics in the world in St. Louis in 1899, formally establishing orthodontics as a specialty. It was Engel who coined the term malocclusion to describe tooth position anomalies, and he introduced the still widely used classification of malocclusions into 3 classes. He invented new appliances, as well as new surgical techniques, and standardized appliances in the treatment of malocclusion of teeth and fractures of the maxillae. The causes of malocclusion were not well understood at the time. Some thought that overbites were caused by mouth breathing and that underbites could be caused by persistent thrusting of the jaw. Few thought it was congenital. Kingsley considered malocclusion a consequence of interracial mixture, and others thought that it was caused by pernicious tongue and lip habits. By 1904, Engel recognized that the nose and sinuses plays an important part in the process. It was in the 1900s that the term braces became common. Braces of the early 1900s used gold, platinum, steel, and rubber to form loops, hooks, and ligatures. 14 to 18 karat gold was especially valuable, prized for its malleability, although it was expensive and required frequent adjustment. These braces wrapped completely around the teeth, as the adhesive for modern brackets didn't exist yet. Steel became commonly used instead of gold in the late 1950s. Interestingly, NASA also played a role in brace technology. In 1959, NASA made an alloy of nickel and titanium called nitinol for use in satellites. And 20 years later, Dr. George Anderson became using nitinol for brace wires, thanks to the metal's superelasticity, which would lead to reduced costs and discomfort. It wasn't until the mid-1970s that modern brackets became common, thanks to the perfection of an adhesive that could effectively bond the brackets to teeth. The 70s also saw the introduction of lingual braces, which could be placed on the inside surface of the teeth. Metal brackets are now often made of a combination of ceramic and metal to make them less visible. The idea of invisible braces actually began as far back as 1945, when orthodontists figured out a series of removable plastic appliances could be used to adjust teeth, but it wasn't until 1997 that Pakistani-American inventor Zia Kisti leveraged computer imaging to invent the Invisalign method. Modern orthodontics, while still occasionally unpleasant, has certainly come a long way since the 1800s, and it's also much more common as standardized techniques and new appliances have made it so much easier to achieve that perfect smile. And braces are really something of a cultural phenomenon. While they're very common in the United States, they're much less so elsewhere in the world. Cosmetic dentistry is now the second leading non-surgical beauty industry in the United States, behind only makeup. And today we understand the growth of the jaw enough that almost no kind of malocclusion is too severe to be fixed. But if you or someone you know has to deal with modern orthodontics, just remember that the same process would have been much more painful for your ancestors.
So I wrote this episode. I think you actually wrote the dental, the
oral
toothpaste one,
oral hygiene thing one, yeah, and and obviously they're they're related. So
yes, and we've as you know, we have a couple of writers, but it's mostly mine or the history guys has written one of these episodes. This one, I think that you had mentioned before some of the people's memories. I think
we did have to
orthodontics.
change the thumbnail. Originally, we showed some crooked teeth and dentures, or not dentures, braces, and I had people just say, "Please, I have had too many painful memories," and so we did change the thumbnail. Again, many people have. It's much less painful today. I think it is. I mean, my daughter's experience was much different than your experience, but I think a lot of people remember that as a very painful experience, and that's fair. Part of the point of the episode that's really interesting is how much it's transformed since, and how much better off you're doing. But of course, you're clearly doing better off than a time when they just with no anesthesia of any kind, they used a hand drill to put wire through. Yeah, there's some. There are some scary pictures in this one. But the thing is, again, history is important in understanding, where we are today with things that so many people experience. You wouldn't want to ignore the history of orthodonture because so many people are now have to deal with orthodonture, and to understand why and how it works and the advantages that we have today is that's really really interesting history, especially to people who, if you had a painful experience with your braces, it's all the more reason to understand the history of that whole process, why they had to do what they did, and how it's going to go in the future, so that hopefully your kids or their kids won't have to go through nearly as painful experience in order to get their teeth straight.
Yeah. And some of it again it's such an interesting way to talk about how our like physical health has changed because of human history. Because this one also, like the toothpaste and oral hygiene, it talks about how maybe populations before we were moving into civilizations and then more modern populations didn't have the malocclusion that we have. And you do mention, when we talk about how it's hard to know because we just don't have that many skulls, and so we're working on a fairly small population, but it seems like our prevalence of things like malocclusion and crowding are much more common today, much higher today than they used to be, and that's interesting. And of course, we don't really know why we kind of offer a couple of explanations.
It's not like with regular tooth decay that it's likely diet that's affecting teeth, but it might be the way that the diet and growth and etc. makes the jaw grow at specific times and things like that. We really don't know, but it's interesting to see that there have always have been efforts at things that we would call orthodonture today. But that's another interesting bit of history, and why that can occur. And it might simply be now that it's not as much a disadvantage as it once was, because it can be repaired, and so because of that, it doesn't. You're able to reproduce and have kids and continue in the gene pool. And
whereas maybe it was. I mean, especially sometimes we have some very extreme cases of problems with teeth and crowding and stuff like that. There was not necessarily, much you could do about it, and the things that they did do about it, as we learned in this episode, were sometimes just absolutely horrifying.
Yes, the whole thought of what you were doing, especially in a time before there was any kind of anesthesia.
Yeah, they're just, or your best choice is to chew on some mint before I go at you with. But some of it's really amazing to think that we cared about. Clearly, they did care about things like straight teeth. I don't know when we talk about the ancient Egypt stuff, it's not always clear if they were doing that kind of orthodontry, like actually on living people, and so which would make it true orthodonture, or if it was they were essentially doing it after death to just give them a better look in the afterlife or in their in their corpse, and we're just not sure exactly.
But we do find ancient teeth that clearly have had some sort of work, bridges or fillings or things that look like they were working like orthodonture.
Even if they weren't, today we're able to do things like dental implants that can essentially function just like a tooth. And you don't really have to worry about it. Some of these might not have been as useful at actually chewing. But even then, you think then it was mostly an aesthetic choice. And I think we could really relate to the idea of wanting to have a nice smile or to have, all your teeth. And that's something that I think we do today just as much as we would have done thousands of years ago. And it seems like that was something that we've always cared about.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even the Egyptians cared if your teeth were crooked. Yeah. That was an aesthetic issue that was important to him, yeah.
But unlike the toothpaste, which has a lot more of this early history in terms of how we were dealing with it, orthodontry doesn't really start being a thing until the more modern era. And it's not that it wasn't a problem, and they didn't apparently try to deal with it in some ways, but we got to places where we were starting to deal with that with science. Sometimes that science is pretty brutal. That ties
to the history of oral care too. But we do start to get what in the 16th, 17th, 18th century, you start to get people that are writing scientific manuals on it. They're identifying these conditions. They're identifying the types of teeth and how they meet together, and etc. And it's honestly changing over time. I was gonna mention, because it always makes me laugh, but there was the Charles II of Spain. Was so inbred that his malocclusion was so bad that his teeth didn't match at all, and he had to have someone else chew his food for him. And so today, if you were the king of Spain, then you could probably afford to have some sort of braces that would have gotten your teeth, so that
as opposed to someone chewing your. He famously had what they call him shovel face.
Shovel face, yes.
The way that his face was, but it was so bad he couldn't chew. He had a number of other issues. That wasn't
the only thing that was wrong. That is one of the most famous malocclusions in history that might have been addressed had they had good orthodonture at the time.
And we talk about the way we talked about before about these like barber surgeons, and this kind of moves into these surgeon dentists. And I guess orthodontics still has quite a bit to do with essentially dental surgery.
And it's interesting that those early surgeon dentists were often naval physicians.
And they're seeing this problem at sea when they've got these people, when you got the same crew that's there for a long period of time. It might be related to scurvy, which causes gum issues and stuff like that, that they got their interest in dental care because of particular issues that occur at sea. And then because it turns your gums black and all that's one of the first signs of scurvy.
Your teeth will come like loose in the gums.
So how dentistry and orthodonture had a big chunk of a start in the conditions that occurred just because you're at sea for a long time is another just interesting bit of history. And if you think about it that way, it could mean that pirates were involved. So, because
certainly pirates needed some dental care.
So maybe maybe it was being on the high seas. The pirates on the high seas are part of how we got to orthodonture.
That's how we figured out that we need things like braces. But certainly
wouldn't be on crooked teeth now.
But it seems, it's the ways that these seemingly unrelated things kind of connect. Yes. Which is so interesting about these kinds of histories.
It is an interesting history. Even if you really hated having braces, it's a really interesting history how we got to braces. How they work and how much easier it is today. And of course, Invisalign is a completely different way than things used to be, and that was found earlier than people might have expected. And
well, we were worried about that kind of thing where they were trying to put stuff on there so that you didn't look like you had something super obvious, because it embarrasses people, and it embarrassed people even quite a long time ago that the idea of braces
all the way back to ancient Egypt, they didn't like the look.
Yeah, and so I never had braces, which was, although I've had dentists look at me more recently and be like, "Oh, you probably could have used braces," but apparently it wasn't serious enough for them to do it. But there's, I think it's a fairly common. A lot of people do it, not everybody, but there's, a significant number of people will have braces, and they're unpleasant in a lot of ways. And in some ways, they've improved, even just in the last 30 years in my lifetime or your lifetime, where how difficult they are to put on, how much they hurt, how visible they are has changed. And I think that's an interesting piece, that we're always trying to make that a more enjoyable experience, especially when it's something that is apparently just kind of unable to be all that enjoyable. But I had never saw someone actually wearing headgear. I saw it in cartoons and TV shows, but in my life, in terms of people I actually knew, I never saw someone wearing headgear. We don't seem to use that very much anymore.
That's one of those things that has improved over time.
Certainly now, Invisalign, way better than having a giant metal thing attached to your head. So,
I guess that's true. Gotta look better.
Pierre Fachad, which we talked about quite a bit in this episode, was a pretty big deal. And we're talking about one guy who sees on the sea that, he kind of gets into dentistry, and he starts just solving problems. And he's behind a lot of this stuff we talk about that, essentially is the foundation of orthodontics.
There's a lot that's being done, in dentistry in general, but there's a lot in orthodontics today that his work would still be instrumental in terms of like learning, the basics of how teeth are supposed to fit together, and how he's the one that first started naming the types of teeth, right? So, in a sort of scientific way, and so that really the foundation of modern dentistry, the foundation of modern orthodonture, and it's kind of interesting that you can tie that to one individual and say this is really where all the advancements we have today really kind of started there.
And he started looking at it scientifically. It was interesting to see how orthodontics split off from dentistry eventually, because they are distinct. They're very related, obviously. I think it's cool to talk about two very related histories like this one, because you kind of can see these connections, and also where it was different and where the reasons for it are different, because dental care, of course, you got to have teeth, but orthodontics moves a lot more into aesthetic stuff, not just aesthetic. There's definitely some health reasons, dealing with things like cleft palate and with severe malocclusion that is definitely health related, but it's also interesting how these two things can be together, and how they can have changed so much to be their whole own professions today. Even if they are connected, I think most people who are in orthodontics train as dentists first, or at least also.
Obviously, no. If there's an orthodontist listening, then go ahead and make a comment.
So someone might know more than I'm not an orthodontist, nor have I ever gone to. I've never even looked into what becoming an orthodontist.
Part of the fun of being the history guy is that we get to study the stuff that we're not expert in, and we get to learn stuff too as we go along.
And then we have a whole part in this story where we talk about Marie Antoinette.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. The whole idea the queen could not have bad teeth. And so she got some of the most cutting-edge care at the time. By cutting-edge also probably was quite painful. But, I mean, it's, part of, if you thought it was good to be queen, well, I mean, obviously... It didn't work out that well for Marie Antoinette either, but if you, I mean that they they made her go through that painful procedure because the queen had to have straight teeth.
Yeah, not just the bandeau, which doesn't sound all that pleasant, but the idea of they're like, we're gonna take we're just gonna take a pair of pliers and physically just kind of yank the tooth. That's horrifying.
Yeah.
That's
I
don't
girl,
like thinking about
doing that for her country.
Yeah. So that because it was an important marriage and. It's really unpleasant, but it's interesting to think that someone so far back would have been complaining about orthodontics essentially the same way that teenagers do today when they have to have braces and get their wisdom teeth out or whatever else they do. That's this were similar things that were complaints, and I can just say that I'm glad that I never had anyone take a pair of pliers to my teeth. We have civilized beyond that, but that was top of the line orthodontics at the time. They're like, yeah, we can move that tooth with force of arms.
Force of arms.
But I also think one of the interesting parts about this, and we've talked about it. We've worked with NASA a couple of times.
Yeah, we have. Yeah,
and what do they call it? They call it nitinol. I think this is a good example of where something invented by NASA shows up in a really unexpected place, and that was essentially revolutionary for how we made our braces and how effective that was. We went from using, if you look at it all over history, we went from using cat gut to try to tie teeth together to using something that was literally invented by to go to space. Yeah. And that's an amazing.
It's interesting how all the pieces fit together and why they fit together the way they do.
Yeah.
If you want good looking teeth, then the history of dentistry and orthodontia is interesting. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, these were things that people cared about over all of human history, and I like when we talk about some stuff where you can really see that. No matter what else happens in history and the good and the bad and how much technology we've invented, there is a core of just humanity. There was a human experience that was in some ways the same in 1650 as it is today or 1,000 years before that.
Absolutely. But anybody in 1650 would have been happy to have the advantages we have today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the History Guy podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Forgotten History, and if you did, you can find more on our website, thehistoryguy.com. We release podcasts every 2 weeks, so stick around if you want to hear more podcasts of Forgotten History. You can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon. You can even get a personalized message from the History Guy himself on Cameo.